Hello Internet, Taliesin here, and today we are talking distance. What you should probably be keeping from that Bill Cosby end of season drinks party he keeps inviting you to, and what you definitely want to put between your cloth-wearing squish bait and that huge glowing motherfucking green monster over there. You see that red circle under her feet? Yeah, you shouldn't be able to see that. You should be much further away. You're wearing a dress, for fuck's sake. Use your brain. Yes, that's right. Today, we are talking ranged DPS in World of Warcraft Legion patch 7.2.5. Because 7.2.5 is a major tuning patch, and you just got tuned majorly. Every spec in the game has some changes that they need to know about in 7.2.5, but especially ranged classes. Because ranged is more than just spinning around like an idiot and waiting for things to walk into your sword. Ranged is a complex science, where even the smallest variation can have a massive effect, which is why ranged DPS players are focused, determined, and always ready to, okay, did you just blink off the edge of the fucking bridge? Now, the thing about class balance is that it's a bit like that copy of Infinite Jest that you've had in your bookcase for the last 6 years. It'll never be finished. But whereas some specific numbers may change from what we show you here throughout the life of 7.25, I think we can look at these specs now and see who's going to be happy with the direction their class is being taken going into the Tomb of Sargeras raid. So, join us as we look at the winners and losers in ranged DPS in World of Warcraft Legion patch 7.2.5, okay? Go, 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 go. The rise and fall of Shadow in Legion so far means the spec has gone through what we in the trade call a Judd Nelson. There was a moment back there, right at the beginning, where they were the absolute top dogs and coolest kid in school with the world at their feet. Shadow were just so fucking cool. But pretty quickly, those self-destructive tendencies took a hold, and what followed was a very public decline and fall from grace. And before you knew it, they were right down at the very bottom, pugging any old shit to make ends meet. And it would seem that there's no going back for Shadow, as any changes in 7.2.5, be they buffs or otherwise, are conspicuous by their absence. They do have a genuinely interesting new PvP talent coming their way in Trauma, which is all very well and good, but it's not going to help this sorry situation, is it? No, the most action Shadow Raiders had is when it looked for a bit like their tier 20 set bonuses were going to be based around Shadow Fiend, which is about as exciting as taking the bins out, but that has now been changed for the better. The 4-piece now draining your insanity 10% slower while in void form, which the top level players might be able to do something interesting with. And hey, I guess there's no nerfs, but as things stand, Shadow Priests are going to have to hope that there's a lot of bosses in Nighthold that facilitate standing still and tunneling if they want to see any big improvements in 7.2.5, and spoiler, there's not. Beast Mastery Hunters are currently the Ramones of ranged DPS. The Ramones only ever needed 3 chords to be at their most effective, and you could say the same about Beast Mastery. Those 3 buttons are going to see you just fine. And let's be clear, there's nothing wrong with that. Don't forget, the Ramones were fucking cool, and Beast Mastery Hunters are okay too. What I'm saying is, there can be beauty in simplicity. And the changes that Beast Mastery are looking at in 7.2.5 aim to keep that simplicity, but try and give you a more active rotation. Although it took Blizzard a while to decide how to do that. They spent weeks on the PTR dicking around with how wild cool procs before abandoning that idea altogether and instead putting Dire Beast and Dire Frenzy on 2 charges each. Now, this should result in more plentiful and smoother focus generation, and hopefully meaning that there are less moments where you're sitting there with no buttons to press, which was still happening in 7.2. And as long as those buffs to Cobra and Chimera shots damage is enough to keep the spec competitive numbers-wise, then you have to say that this is a welcome upgrade to Beast Mastery. And if you're one of those players who feels intimidated at the thought of having more choice to make throughout a fight, well, don't worry, because we've got you covered with this handy gameplay guide. Marksmanship is also going to see a change in its priorities, with Vulnerable becoming much less important in your damage dealing, what with it seeing a massive nerf in the damage boost that it gives, and Patient Sniper also nerfed to match, with aimed shots damage up significantly to plug the resulting deep-shaped hole. All of this, of course, results in 0 change to your rotation as Marksmanship. Aimed shot is still going to be doing pretty much the exact same damage within those vulnerable windows as it does now. What this does is make those moments where you haven't got a vulnerable proc saved much more forgiving, which is just going to give Marksmanship Hunters a bit more flexibility overall, giving you more time to dedicate practice to the more important things in life. Oh, come on, let's be honest, there aren't any balanced druids watching this, are there? And if there are, seriously, why? Why are you here? You must know there's absolutely fuck all going on with your spec in 7.2.5, surely. Maybe you're here just in case you missed something. Well, I can tell you now that no, you didn't miss anything, sorry. You've had an overall damage decrease of 4%, with various spells getting buffed by about that much to make up for it, and Star Surge with a pretty tasty buff, actually. Apart from that, the big news is that Stellar Drift is getting a nerf, which sees it decrease Starfall's radius by 50% down from 60%, which which doesn't sound like much, but kind of is, although even Katie Hopkins couldn't pretend to be outraged by this one, because you had to be expecting it. At this point, Starfall is more meme-worthy than Morpheus hooking up with the Ermagerd girl and having mean children. None of this should jeopardize Balance's pretty comfy spot at the moment going into Tomb though, and I guess that's what counts. Okay, let's get serious, because 725 should see another shift in the balance of power between the three mage specs. A class which has seen more meta changes this expansion than a hipster eating a pizza while reading a coffee table book about coffee tables and watching himself on reality TV. First up, fire was the king, and then it definitely wasn't. And one thing we can say with certainty is that it still definitely isn't. 725 being less a rescue job for the spec and more an unflattering obituary. Their general damage has been boosted 6%, which is fine. Warmth of the Phoenix has a 2-second duration increase, and the Tomb T20 set bonuses are going to get you about as excited as a new DC Universe movie, which is a shame, but Blizzard seem to be of the opinion that as Mage has access to 3 different dedicated DPS specs, it's okay to completely ignore one of them while it gives another its moment in the sun, as it did with Frost in 7.2, as top players were getting absolutely insane numbers out of the spec through Icy Veins, which is great news because it still is, in my opinion, the most fun Mage spec to play by miles. It looks, however, like the days of wild Frost proc parties may be a thing of the past in 725 though, as Icy Veins is, rather predictably, getting huge nerfs as a mechanic. Thermal Void now increases Icy Veins by 10 seconds, but importantly, only extends the duration by 1 second per Ice Lance as opposed to 2, which means you're just not going to be able to maintain those outrageous Icy Veins uptimes. Blizzard have tried to make up for that slightly by buffing most other spells by around 15%, which is going to smooth out the whole playstyle and make it a whole lot less hectic with fewer wild swings, but it means that at the top end we're going to see less huge numbers, which is inevitably going to see a lot of mages cast aside their fresh new Frost specs, even though they were never reaching anything like those numbers anyway. It is a harsh nerf to Icy Veins for sure, but if we're honest, it was kind of getting out of control, and if you look at the T20 set bonuses, then you realise that if they hadn't done something, it was about to get NHL touchdown celebration out of control, as those top players would be hitting potential regular 100% uptime on Icy Veins. I don't think it's the death of Frost in 725 by any means, even with the double Ice Lance fix. Fixed means you can't do it anymore, but there is no doubt that for Tomb of Sargeras, all of the cool kids will be switching to the new darling, Arcane. Yes, with Fire's continued leave of absence and Frost's neutering, there was room at the top, and Arcane looks ready to fill it pretty much by default. Arcane Barrage, Arcane Blast, and Arcane Explosion get boosted, which is essentially a neutral move with the aura nerf, but where Arcane is looking most exciting is in its T20 set bonuses, giving you some massive burst potential when you come out of invisibility. You always wanted to be a rogue, didn't you? No? Well, tough shit, because that's what you are. You are Rogue Mage. Rage. Moog. Anyway, the long-time Arcane community isn't especially pleased, but it's simming really well and still has a really nice, smooth rotation. Personally though, I'll be staying as Frost for Tomb of Sargeras, and it'll be interesting to see where these 3 specs end up. Elemental players are a little bit nervous going into Tomb of Sargeras. There's a general feeling that their spec is simply underpowered. Now, if there's one thing you learn doing this job, it's that everyone thinks their spec is underpowered, but in this case, it's hard to argue with them, especially when you look at the fights in the new raid and wonder where Elemental's cleave damage speciality is going to be all that much use. The problem Blizzard has is buffing the numbers in a, in my opinion, pleasingly RNG spec without changing the playstyle mechanics that, for the most part, work really well and feel good. The builders and spenders and builder-spender cycle is all well tuned, and don't forget that while other specs struggle to maintain one viable build, Elemental has multiple. And look, I know you're gonna hate me for this, but it is worth pointing out that Elemental are only having problems in Mythic raiding. If your level is Heroic and Mythic plus dungeons, you're probably wondering what I'm talking about here because they feel fine, but Mythic Elemental players are crying out for more reliable power, and Blizzard don't seem to have that much inclination to help them out. So there's a slight change to the duration of Earth Elemental and a reworking of Fire and Ice, and that's pretty much it. Not the flat buffs that Mythic Elemental players were hoping for, it's fair to say. This is one of those specs where I really wouldn't be surprised to see big changes happen at a weird time just before Tomb opens or something like that, so my apologies if this video is wrong or out of date if that did happen. I kind of hope for your sake it did. Affliction Warlocks didn't so much rule the meters in 7.2 as start their own religion and have the patch worship them as actual gods, and so you won't exactly shit yourself with shock to hear that Affliction gets the official least surprising nerf of the expansion so far, with Malefic Grasp's damage increase reduced down to 40%. Now, as you can imagine, this made Affliction players really sad, so then Blizzard took it down even further to 25%, presumably just for the lols. And now Affliction players wish that they'd remembered rule 1 of being top of the damage meters by a country mile: always be working on your off specs. The fact that Malefic Grasp was your go-to talent in any situation meant that it had to be changed for the good of the spec in the long run, and your damage spells have been buffed by 25%. Don't worry about those general talent nerfs, that's just so they keep in line with the extra damage that the spells are doing. But still, it stings. I know it does. Especially as Haunt is such a meh alternative, really. A legitimate concern that Affliction players have is the lack of proper ad fights in Tomb of Sargeras, but on the plus side, Soul Effigy is gone, and if that piece of shit talent getting removed from the game doesn't cheer you up, then frankly nothing will. I'm gonna say removed, that's not quite enough for me. I want to see that fucker encased in concrete and thrown in the North Sea. Death's Embrace, its replacement, isn't a game changer, but it's a pleasingly appropriate Affliction talent, and it's not Soul Effigy, so it automatically wins. Although Affliction have lost a lot of momentum in Tomb, I can't call them losers, because they are still powerful and still super fun to play. Demonology, it's fair to say, we will not be talking about so much in this section, because for the second patch in a row, they've managed to keep their heads down and avoid a nerf storm to keep their status as the most predictable and in control of the Warlock specs. Demo players are happy and enjoying themselves, and that's set to continue in 7.2.5. On one hand, their wild imps get nerfed a bit through changes to Infernal Furnace, but Hand of Gul'dan gets a big fat buff on the other hand. They've got a nice T20 bonus too. More haste when you call Dreadstalkers is always going to be welcome. So basically, the good times are set to continue for Demonology. Oh, and they even changed Soul Harvest, so it's still trash and you still won't take it, but at least they tried, eh? Destruction, on the other hand, we are going to fucking talk about, because in terms of sheer improvements to a spec, Destro are the big winners, not only in Ranged DPS, but maybe out of any other spec in the game this patch. And let's face it, they needed a bit of love, and Blizzard have gone all out to give it to them with a complete rework focusing around soul shards. Basically, you're getting Burning Embers back again, with each soul shard now split into 10 soul fragments. And as all baseline spells now generate fragments, shard generation should be much smoother and more constant and slower, which doesn't sound like a good thing, but really is, because it means you won't just be a Chaos Bolt spam machine. So Chaos Bolt can have a lovely hefty buff. Oh, and even better, Havoc has had a cooldown increase, and Wreak Havoc only decreases that cooldown to 20 seconds, which again sounds like a horrible nerf, but it's actually a fantastic change that any Destruction player will be totally on board with. Now that all Destruction damage doesn't have to be balanced around it having 100% uptime on a spell that makes you damage a second target, single target can really improve. And if that weren't enough, Eradication has been buffed. It's not clear if it's now preferable to Empowered Life Tap on that row, but if it is, then that's another beautifully wrapped gift. Oh, and by the way, Cataclysm has a shorter cooldown, so that's a more fluid Mythic Plus experience right there. And fuck me if Channeled Demon Fire hasn't been given more damage and a longer cooldown, so that's not going to clog up your rotation so much. Basically, this is what Destruction should have been at the start of Legion, and there's not a single player of this spec who's going to be anything less than thrilled with the changes. People are talking about it being the most powerful Warlock spec in Tomb, which seems a bit of a stretch, but fuck it, it's going to make it a lot more fun, a lot more viable, and a lot more badass, so what's not to like? Oh my god, I can't believe I've just won this award for making the best YouTube video ever. I mean, it's not like I didn't deserve it. This is so exciting. I'd like to thank my parents, obviously, but I'd also like to thank everyone that donated their footage and opinions to make this video and help us. Your names are in the description below. Get off my award. And also, obviously, I'd like to thank our incredible patrons who give their actual real-life money to help make these videos happen. Guys, if you enjoyed this video, don't thank me. Thank them. Thank you. Thank you.
Are you done pretending to have won an award now? Good. If you liked the video, you can like it if you like, and if you didn't, remember to downvote the shit out of it. And remember, my name is the Lost Codex. No, it's not.
My name is Taliesin.
And I'm Evitel.
Until next time, team, cheerio.